What's up, guys? Welcome back. Being at the last week of June when this will come out, figured we'd do a special Pride Month episode. For those that don't know, June is Pride Month, and a couple things to say about that. One, for all the people out there that consider themselves part of the LGBTQ community, if you're out, you're happy, you're living your best life, just know that me personally, as well as plenty other people out there, allies, we're proud of you, we're happy for you, and we'll keep pushing for you. For those who may be still in the closet, struggling with who they are, their identity, things like that, two things I want to say. One, it's okay. When you're ready, we'll be here for you, we'll help you. Just know you have friends, you have allies, and there's plenty of people here that are happy to be here for you. And two, personally, I'd like to apologize that we live in a society where you feel either afraid or nervous or feel like you can't be yourself. It's 2020 in America. You should be able to live the life that you want, be who you are. So I'd like to apologize that this is the society we live in, where you still feel like being who you are is not good enough, or you have to live in fear of being yourself because of people with hate out there. So I just wanted to get that out. What I'd like to do for this episode, being it's the end of Pride Month, kind of go over a couple things that if you are a member of the LGBTQ community or you're an ally, you might be aware of these things. Other people that, I don't want to say ignorant, but may not know about them, may not be part of this, may not see these things. There's a couple issues going on, good things, bad things in the community right now. So I'd like to take the time to go over those, including a couple of Supreme Court landmark cases, a couple things going on, maybe hasn't hit Supreme Court yet or is coming up. So if you're tuning in, we're going to get to those now. First, conservatives ran the Senate, at one point the House. We've had two Supreme Court justices put on the panel of the 9 Supreme Court justices. Typically, even though they should be impartial, it tends to bounce around between there's a conservative side, there's a liberal side, and there's always one or two swing voters. But this week, in what many consider a landmark case, involving Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which said that employers can't discriminate based on age, sex, things like that. What the Supreme Court ruled just within the last week, and actually a surprising 6-3, so not only was Justice Roberts siding with what people consider the liberal side of the Supreme Court, but actually Neil Gorsuch, which was nominated by Trump as a conservative, actually wrote the majority opinion and cited that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act actually includes and should be considered, that included in the sex portion is sexual orientation and gender identity. So not only can you not be discriminated, fired based on your biological sex, which is what many had considered for the longest time, including either male or female. It now includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So that's a landmark win for the LGBTQ community, mainly because you can no longer be fired if your employer finds out you're gay, you're a lesbian, you're transsexual, which is facing a lot of heat. Not that lesbians, bisexuals, gay members don't deal with it, but this seems to be kind of a focus on trans individuals lately, and a lot of hate, a lot of misunderstanding. So this was a huge win that should allow people to be themselves in their workplace. When you're from an area like I am, where it's very conservative, very, I won't call it old-fashioned, I would just call it hellaciously backward, it's a big thing. So to have that sort of protection and be safe in your job and can't be fired just because of who you are, it's a big win. I know a lot of people, friends of mine, celebrated on Facebook, lots of puns, things like that. My favorite one was "Move, bitch, get out my gay." So there's a lot of celebration, and there's a lot of reason to celebrate. It's a big win, and it's something we shouldn't have had to worry about, but many did just because of the makeup of the courts. So again, in a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court, sex, which is written into the Civil Rights Act of 1964, also protects sexual orientation and gender identity. So one of those things that if you are a member of that community, you're an ally to that community, this is a big win, and it should be considered a big win. Moving on to sort of a, I won't even say sort of a, it's a big loss for the LGBTQ community. In Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, there is a section similar to the Civil Rights Act which says you cannot discriminate in health care based on race, age, sex, origin, things like that, similar to the Civil Rights Act. Unfortunately, well, in 2016, during the Obama administration, they covered gender identity and sexual orientation was a ruling as part of the Affordable Care Act, which is similar to the discrimination in the job force that just passed the Supreme Court. But in this case, this was reviewed and looked back, and Trump and his administration ruled back those protections, saying that that part, Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, which explains about discriminating based on sex, does not include sexual orientation and gender identity. So where Obama said that that would be protected, you can't discriminate in health care based on sexual orientation, gender identity, that was included, they're now saying that does not get covered, and sex specifically means in the Affordable Care Act to include just biological sex, so male, female. So it was a huge loss, basically stating that of all the things you can be discriminated, or you're protected from discrimination in healthcare, it does not include gender identity or sexual orientation, which is monumental for transgender individuals who already face severe discrimination when it comes to things such as healthcare, purely based on their gender identity. They're no longer protected, so any sort of discrimination against them based purely on that is not covered. So there's a planned fight back, but right now it's a huge hit to the community, and something we all need to keep an eye on to make sure and to push back and say these individuals, there's no reason for them to be discriminated in healthcare based purely on an aspect of who they are. So again, it's a huge loss, but the fight will continue. And finally, one last, at least legal battle I think needs pointed out. It's currently making its way to the Supreme Court to be ruled upon. It's called Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, and this one centers around a Catholic adoption agency in Philadelphia is arguing that the First Amendment right for them for freedom of religion allows them to bar same-sex couples from adopting children at their agency. So what that would mean is that they have the right to discriminate against same-sex couples purely based on the fact that they're gay. They don't think that they should be allowed to adopt the children, and they're arguing because they are Catholic that their freedom of religion basically allows them to discriminate that because of their freedom of religion they are allowed to not adopt two gay couples. Something to keep an eye on. The Trump administration is arguing, which of course he always argues on the side of kind of the religious side and freedom of religion, not because he appears to be a very devout or religious man himself because he likes to pander to the base that will give him votes. So his argument is they should be allowed to do that because their freedom of religion allows them to discriminate against gay couples based on that. The problem with that is, and there's two sides and there's kind of an irony to it as well. One side is you're basically making the case that children are better off in the system than they are with a gay couple. That's just totally wrong. Now don't get me wrong, I had both of my parents growing up, but my parents are separated, and having a gay parent, I can assure you that the only thing you're going to get by growing up with a gay couple is the same with any other decent couple. It's love, it's understanding, and more of an open mind towards the world than you may not if you grew up without that around you. So to make the case these children are better off in the system, which most of the time doesn't give a damn about them, not because there aren't good workers, because it's overworked, it's overcrowded. There's just a lot of issues that can't or are not being addressed to say that kids are better off in the system. Two, if the Constitution says we're all entitled to life and liberty, that's part of the Constitution. That was included in the original. The Declaration of Independence said it. And everybody should be entitled to those liberties, which includes the right to adopt children. So your First Amendment rights should not trump the right to adopt children based on gender identity. The other problem with that is that freedom of religion also is freedom from religion. So your right to free exercise religion should not trump someone's ability to adopt children, especially if the home itself is loving, caring, and the only difference that you can see is that it's same-sex parents. The great irony in that is the idea that most of these people pushing to allow them the right to discriminate based on that are pro-life people. So you're all about protecting these children while they're in the womb, but now that they're out and living, breathing children, now you don't care enough to send them at home. You just rather them stay in the system. So the great irony, it's ridiculous. There's no reason for it. So again, I thought it was important to do something around Pride Month and centered around all of our LGBTQ brothers, sisters, all those individuals, just to know that, one, you have allies. There are people here that are not so close-minded, that understand, even if I don't understand your journey, what you're going through, I understand your right to live. So that's one thing I wanted to say, and the reason I wanted to base one around this in the last week of Pride Month, just to say, hey, we're here, we hear you, we're here for you. Secondly, I wanted people to see at the highest level, those that may not be aware of these cases that involve the LGBTQ community, simple things such as the ability to adopt children, not be fired for being gay, having proper health care and being taken care of just because you're transgender. Maybe people aren't aware of that, and that's not to say they shouldn't be. You should be aware of what all your fellow individuals are going through, but I was hoping that it might shed some light on that so that people understand that there is real problem right now. There is real discrimination against people. Obviously we're seeing it on the Black Lives Matter front, and I tried to say a little bit about that before. I know that's still going on and it still deserves our attention, but there are other fights being fought as well that I don't want to get lost, including the protections for our fellow members of society. So hopefully this helped kind of shed some light on things going on. Hopefully this made people aware of what's happening, and finally, hopefully it helps somebody. If it doesn't, just know that there are people like me all over the world that are here for you, and want to wish you a happy Pride Month. I hope the rest of the month goes well as the other 11 months out of the year. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you again next week. See ya.